Welcome back to the Show My Scars podcast. I'm your host, Derek Duker. Today's episode will be a little bit different. This is a presidential election year, and something that I've noticed over the last decade plus is how polarizing politics has gotten. Not only are people voicing their opinions more firmly and loudly, but there seems to be an increase in people completely cutting off family and friends who disagree with their opinion. Couple this with the fact that the number of close friendships Americans report having has declined significantly in the past few decades, and it paints a scary picture. Further, in just my personal experience at least, I find that people are developing these incredibly firm opinions with little to no background research to back them up. Most get their facts from opinion-based shows or, worse, social media posts. Rarely do they look for and consider the opposing reports. So, to help us make more informed political decisions as well as become more media literate, I've brought in my former broadcast journalism professor, Kevin Swift, who has been in and around the journalism world for quite some time. I think what Kevin has to say can be applied to just about anything that you care deeply for. You want to know what's true, what would bring about positive change in your life, what would make a positive difference for any issue out there? Seek answers from all sides with a truly open mind and don't be afraid to challenge your own beliefs. Don't be afraid to be wrong. It doesn't make you a lesser person. Being okay with being wrong actually makes you a better person. So, without further ado, I bring you Kevin Swift. For those that don't know, Kevin Swift was my broadcast journalism professor back in the day. Kevin, what are you up to now that you've left Missouri State?
I'm doing the same thing in a different place. I'm at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. I teach broadcast and media courses. And I teach some video production, but I also teach courses. I taught courses on media law, theory, research, you name it. I've taught, ethics and everything in the field. So I've really got a rounded view of the students and teaching everything that involves broadcasting, news, media, sports, and whatnot.
When did you remind me again? I know a little bit about your backstory. I remember the old Swiftman Live stories of when you used to work at a radio station. But when did you jump into the journalism industry?
Well, for me, it was kind of a slow bleed into it. I started out DJing at a local college radio station before I was even a student there, and I realized that it was something that I really liked. So I was DJing music and then doing news breaks and things like that. And then I became a broadcast journalism major at Westminster College, and I was able to do a lot with that. I was a few years older than the other students. I had gone and played guitar for a living for a few years and decided I didn't like the business end of that. So I stuck with broadcast. I still play guitar even today, but just for fun. But the broadcast end of it, there were a lot of opportunities. I was in college and I was doing all of the things you do in college with the classes and the newscast and the student newspaper, and I did radio, but I also had opportunities with other local radio stations and some voiceover work because I sounded a little bit older, I think, and then some local cable stations. So just while I was in college, I was able to do all of the student work and some professional work. And I really had a chance to do many different things with using my voice and doing some journalism and doing some video production for different cable stations and whatnot. And then I interned at WKBN in Youngstown, Ohio, and that was great. I went to graduate school for social and public policy. I was already working in journalism, so I wanted to put my focus on that. And my intention was to go and and be a White House correspondent. And so I was working at Channel 4 News in Pittsburgh, and I ended up producing for them, writing and producing. And I was doing the master's degree in social and public policy, studying, policy analysis and whatnot. Real exciting, right? It sounds real exciting to most people. But from there, I ended up at, oh boy, I always leave some things out. But I ended up in Maryland, and I was at University of Maryland doing my PhD. I was working with Lee Thornton. She was my advisor, my mentor. I was her graduate assistant, and she had been a White House correspondent for CBS. So I thought, wow, I'm in. This is it,
Yeah.
And then I started teaching. I was teaching with her, doing some of the teaching load in her classes, and then they gave me my own classes to teach, and I just loved it. I just kind of fell in love with teaching and watching the students come in with this, this general idea at 18 or 19 years old. Yeah, man, I think maybe I want to do this. And then they leave with a job, and I see them on television or hear them on the radio. I thought that was great. But I was studying for my comprehensive exams, and my wife was working in the Cincinnati, Louisville, Lexington, Kentucky area. And I went down there with her for a little over a year, and I was working at WVLK radio, and I was anchor reporting for them. And, I had done radio in the past, in college and just after, and that was an interesting experience. It was a very popular news radio station in Lexington, and the number one radio station in town was a classic rock station. The number two station was News Talk, WVLK, and I know that is a big deal, especially in a growing market like Lexington. I think their media market 62, 63, something like that. The number two station overall, not another rock station, a country station, or a pop station. The number two station in town when I was there was News Talk. And I was, when I was on in the mornings, I was on every 15 minutes and then every half hour. So I got a lot of experience that way and covered some interesting stories. So I've done a lot of everything. I've done a lot of freelance work. And so I joke to my students, that doesn't get you a big high-paying network job, but it's great for teaching because, I've done radio, I've done television, I've done video production, so all of those different things, and kind of been all over the map and didn't specialize in any one area, just kind of the whole big picture. So that compared to working in academia and doing research and giving presentations to the public and even professionals has really been an eye-opening experience.
I'm super thankful that you wound up in teaching, because I always tell everybody you're one of two teachers I bring up when I talk about who really shaped me as like a professional. A lot of the things that I have, just the chats that we've had or things I've learned in your classes, I bring them up all the time, including especially over the last several years. We were talking before we started recording about how divided politics has gotten, and I think a lot of it comes down to being able to understand what you're reading and really, really pull the truth out of it. And a quote, I hope you're the one that said this, because it could be Andy Klein, but I'm pretty sure it was you that said broadcast journalism or some intro to journalism course should be a prerequisite for incoming freshmen. Number one, are you the one that said that? Or number two, if you want to take it and run with it, why do you feel that's important?
Yeah, I have said that before and similar things. I had a professor in graduate school who really, we talk about our favorite professors. This guy was mine. His name is Mike Dillon at Duquesne University. And I was doing my master's in social and public policy, but I did what they call a cognate, which is the graduate equivalent of a minor. I did that in journalism. So I combined the two. And Mike Dillon used to say that he thought students in kindergarten should be learning media literacy. And, the students in the class, we all kind of looked at each other and thought, that's a little bit extreme. But now I know what he means. I think kids need to start learning about media literacy and what are you watching and reading and what's really going on here. So yeah, I definitely said that certainly a prerequisite for incoming freshmen in college. They should have some understanding of media literacy, and anybody who can work a device or do some editing or anything like that, they think they're media literate, but really you find that they're not. And I think that I've done some presentations in the public and realized some basic things that they don't know. And I think that it's a little bit frightening, and I think that leads to why we're so polarized. So media literacy is the ability to apply critical thinking skills to the mass media. And a lot of people like to complain about it, but then when you kind of probe into what they're complaining about, you realize they don't really even understand what they're watching and reading. So, for example, local news is the majority of news in the United States, something like 700 some local media markets, local news stations that do local news in the United States. So we have a little over 200 media markets, 700 some affiliates, network affiliates doing local news. And that's an inside lookout. It's very straightforward: weather, traffic, product recalls, road and school closings, accidents, local crime, community events. Those are things that people need to know. They need to know about their community. They need to know what's going on. There's very, very little opinion in there, except for the jokes that they tell about the weather and things like that. They kind of joke around with each other. But local news is an inside lookout. This is our community. Here's what's going on. They expect you to know the street names, some of the locations, and things like that. National news is an outside look in. If you watch nightly news with Lester Holt or something, and one of the nightly news from the networks, they'll go around the country. You know, this is Springfield, Missouri. This is Fayetteville, North Carolina. This is Lexington, Kentucky. And they'll tell you something that's going on there. But it's an outside look in. They don't expect you to know the streets and the businesses and, you know, and I think in every town that I've lived in, and I've lived in 8 states and 14 cities doing all the different things I've done, there's some family. There's a family that's been there forever and runs businesses and their names all over everything. It's been that way in every town, I think, that I've lived in. But local news expects you to know that. National news will not. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Cable news. So this is what I call news programming, in that it's not really a newscast at all. It's talk shows about items that are in the news. And they'll have sort of an expert panel. Sometimes they're on the set, and sometimes they're in, you know, what we call double, triple boxes in TV. Really, it looks like a Zoom screen. And they will just get their opinions on whatever it is that's going on. I was listening on the radio today, and they're talking about Donald Trump's trial in New York. And they'll go around to different experts. Some of them aren't even media people. Some of them are lawyers and historians and things like that. But, you know, cable news is going to give you live breaking news. They do a good job with that. So if something's going on, they will be there and do a live report. And I think MSNBC, CNN, Fox, they all do a good job of that. But when it comes to their programming throughout the day, it's not a newscast at all. These are talk shows with a host or hosts, and they will go around and get different opinions. And it's very, very opinionated, and people will listen to these things and say, wow, they're terrible. They're terrible journalists. They're just giving you their opinion on everything. Well, of course, this is a talk show. This isn't a newscast at all. If you watch local news, they're going to tell you straightforward exactly what's going on about a train derailment or some big community event that's going on. It can be positive. But on cable, they're just, you know, these cable news networks, quote unquote, they're doing talk show programming, and it's about items in the news. So I think a lot of Americans will watch these cable shows, and, you know, sometimes they agree with it and sometimes they don't, depending on which one you're watching. They all lean one way, you know, heavily or slightly, and they'll either agree with it or they'll get angry at it. And it just divides us. And then people start looking for those programs that they agree with. That's called cognitive consistency. They're trying to find programming that they agree with because it makes them feel better.
I think that a lot of people get those things confused, and I find it when I'm trying to have a discussion with somebody and they keep throwing out opinions as facts, because I think they watch those things and take it as that's a journalist on a big time TV show, what he's saying must be true. And there might be some truth to what they're saying, but they're being paid for their opinions because they're
Right.
either popular or controversial.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think where I was just talking about this with one of my colleagues recently, where journalists have gone wrong is that they may have spent a career being a serious reporter, going out reporting stories, giving straightforward information, and then they make appearances on these talk shows and give their opinions about things. I don't think that's very smart.
Right.
If you're a journalist, if you're a reporter, you should remain that. People can go on talk shows, and like I said, if you pay attention to who's on these shows, a lot of them aren't journalists. A lot of them are lawyers or historians or even academics, just giving their opinions about some situation and how they think it's going to go. Or they could be retired politicians even. And the important thing is, and I'm not saying those shows are bad, I'm saying that the public needs to know what they are. So if you understand, if you watch MSNBC, you're going to get a more liberal perspective. If you watch Fox, you're going to get a more conservative perspective. CNN has kind of gone back and forth a little bit over the years. They've changed ownership. So they've kind of gone from the station that was trying to be right down the middle to left-leaning to a little bit right-leaning and back to left-leaning. But if you know that, it doesn't bother you as much. So I will watch all of them. If something's going on and I want to get some opinions about it, I will flip back and forth. And in my cable, they're right next to each other, 201, 202, 203. I'll just flip right back and forth, and I can hear them giving different opinions about the same topic. And if it's a big one, and around election time, you really will hear that. And it's like, oh, that's the conservative viewpoint. What's the liberal? Okay, I see what they're saying. And you can just go back and forth and get different viewpoints on it, and you kind of can form your own viewpoint based on the different points of view that you've seen. But if you just watch one, you're going to have all the talking points for one viewpoint. And if you believe strongly one way or another, and you watch the opposite, if you're very liberal and watch Fox, oh, I can't believe they said that. And if you're very conservative and watch MSNBC, I can't believe they said that, and they're wrong and they're lying. But it's really just opinions. And where I think it becomes a problem in America is that they just call this, the general public will call this media. And I don't allow my students to say that. I don't allow my students to say the media. They have to tell me what kind of media they're talking about. News media, sports media. Are you talking about Hollywood, entertainment media? Because they're all media, but they're very different.
Yeah, I remember that rule in your class. I think that served me well in being able to identify what exactly it is I'm talking about, and it kind of gives me a better avenue of dissecting what it is that I'm looking at, because it does force me to think like, oh, where is their viewpoint coming from?
Right. Yeah, I would just shout it out if students said media. What media? But yeah, I think that's the important thing, and that's basic media literacy. We're not even getting into any kind of heavy theory or anything like that. Just basic media literacy. Do you know what you're watching and reading? I'm watching local news. I'm watching national news. I'm watching cable news programming, and I always put that word in there because it's not a newscast. You're not watching a newscast about events that are going on, and they're giving you important information that you need to know. No. You're watching probably an hour-long show, because they have different hosts that host them, and they'll tell you up front what the 3 or 4 topics are they're going to talk about that day, and they get people on to talk about them. That's a talk show.
Yeah.
So that's very, very different. What I like to ask the public, and I've done presentations. I did one out in Springfield at the Galois about it was one of the, I think it was when, Obama-Romney, one of the debates, and they filled the place with people, and we watched the debate and had a bunch of low academics and professionals up on a panel. And I got on the topic of media literacy, And I asked this audience, and there were, I don't know how many the Galois holds, but it's a lot. There were at least hundreds of people there, and I asked people to raise their hand if they knew the difference between professional news media and paparazzi.
Oh, boy.
I saw about 10 hands. About 10 people raised their hands. And then, so I've learned to not get upset or get too riled up. I can talk forever, but I very calmly explain, you're not alone. That's not uncommon. And then I will ask people, okay, what do you think the difference is? And some people will get angry if they're critical of media and say, there is no difference. And I say, oh, no. There's a very, very big literal and theoretical difference between the two, in that legitimate news media has to answer to unions. They have to answer to bosses. So, for example, if you're a videographer, which we call photogs in television, if you're a videographer, photog, and you're out shooting video, you have to stay on public property. You have to follow the rules that they have set. You can't trespass, or you'll have to answer to your union. You'll almost always get fired or in big trouble for it. So you have responsibilities and professionalism. You have to follow the rules. Paparazzi are independent contractors that work for themselves. So they make money by taking pictures and video and selling it. So if they happen to trespass in an effort to get a picture of somebody, usually a celebrity, they don't care. They'll pay their $200 fine, and they can't get fired from their own job. They work for themselves, so they'll take pictures of celebrities, and if they happen to get a rare celebrity photo or the big one, celebrity babies, they can sell those for $15,000-$20,000 easy, and that's how they make money. So they'll break rules, they'll break laws, misdemeanor type laws by trespassing and not following directions from the police and that sort of thing. So very different, and they're very aggressive. Paparazzi are proactive. They'll find out where people are going to be and show up and wait for them. Professional news media is reactive. When something happens, we'll show up. If there's an 8-car pileup on the highway, we'll show up and get video of it and try to talk to witnesses. We're reactive. Hey, what happened? What happened here? And then we'll talk to the police and fire and rescue. How long is the road going to be closed? And that sort of thing. But, unless it's a press conference, we're really not showing up and waiting for people. But paparazzi will do that. So that's just one example. And I've done this conversation in public forums. I've done it with professionals. And they'll say, oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right about that. And you realize this is basic media literacy that people should be learning in middle school, high school. And you have adults screaming and hollering, getting red in the face. They're just a bunch of liberals. They're just a bunch of this, And it's like, if you understood what you were watching, you could make some use out of it. And I think that's where media literacy is most important.
Right. And I loved your couple conversations back there, but I love the idea of flipping back and forth, because that's something I do as well. When I'm about to vote for somebody, I look up the stories on both sides of the aisle, because I feel like somewhere in between is where I'm going to find the full truth, or at least understand better what the fears are, or things to look out for. And in fact, I know this one was Andy, because it could only be him, but I remember him saying, he showed us a documentary of the NRA, and then he asked us, what we thought about it and things, and he said himself, I think sometimes they're crazed idiots too, but I'm an NRA member because I feel like we need both sides. And that just, it made me, it just kind of floored me for a minute. I was like, yeah, that's right. Well, we can't just constantly be sitting in our own echo chambers and believe that this is reality. We need to get differing perspectives, and that would make us a more well-rounded individual, at least in my opinion. And I think that's where people are kind of straying from one another when they are unfriending, somebody on Facebook just because they see, they're voting for the other person. Of course, if they're causing some sort of emotional distress, you should probably, at the very least, unfollow them. But getting upset that someone else is voicing their opinion or possibly a fact about a differing viewpoint than yours, I think that's important because you have to keep yourself honest.
Right. Yeah, Andy and I got along very well and talked about these things a lot, so it's not surprising that we said some of the same things. We agree on keeping an open mind, and I am a true political independent, and I tell my students that that's because, you know, you spend years working in news media, and you start to see politicians as politicians.
Yeah.
And especially on the state and local level, I've seen them switch parties because it would be easier to get elected and that sort of thing. And I just see them as politicians trying to get elected. And I will watch, you know, I might have a certain opinion about one politician, and then I'll watch the opposing, you know, if I'm looking for opinions, I'll watch some of the cable news or read some commentaries in the newspapers. And I'll look at some opposing viewpoints, listen to some opposing viewpoints, and think, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's true. I guess that's true. And the side that supports them is conveniently not mentioning that at all.
Right.
And I stumble upon that all the time. I shouldn't say stumble upon because it's kind of there all the time. I will purposely look for you know, what we call cognitive dissonance. I don't really have that because I'm looking for opinions that differ from mine. But I know that I'm an oddball. I'm a veteran journalist and an academic, so I'm always looking for new perspectives. But yeah, I see that a lot, and it hits me quite a bit that I hadn't thought of that. That's true. And you know, I don't want to ramble on over multiple subjects, but you mentioned social media. Social media is a terrible place to try to talk about politics because there's no real discussion. Like you and I are having a discussion. This is great. We could have this with 3, 4, 5, 6 people. Social media, it tends to be just people taking jabs at each other, and you can't really have a conversation at all. So I avoid politics altogether on social media. I talk about fun stuff. Sunsets and rainbows and things like that. So I avoid it. So to me, that's what social media is for. But you know, and the occasional, you know, wild piece of video or something like that that's not really political. But if you want to talk about, you know, these kind of issues, I'm always willing to talk about it. But I want to talk about it. I don't want to take jabs at each other on social media. That's just silly. It's not a good place to do it. But but I think it's important to discuss and important for people. And when I teach my intro to mass comm class, I always congratulate the students, and I say that congratulations on pursuing further knowledge on this. You're putting yourselves in a position, even if it's just an elective course, you're putting yourselves in a position to learn about some things and to open your minds and you know, become more media literate. And that goes all the way from news to, well, we just finished a section on film, and I was talking about parallel action, and the students, oh yeah, I see that all the time. Yeah, I see that in movies, and I hadn't thought of that. And that's why I teach. I love that. You know,
yeah.
I love hearing them say that. So I think it works.
This episode of the Show My Scars podcast is brought to you by Two Oddballs Creative. Quality graphic design can make the difference between someone connecting to your brand and you becoming an afterthought. Your brand's design should grab attention and be memorable. Furthermore, graphic design is a visual representation of what your brand stands for and sets the tone for a prospective customer. So what does your logo and other branded materials say about your business? If your branding needs some help or you don't have any yet, the Oddballs can provide 100% custom professional illustrations, branding, concept and color consultation, and target market research. You can get a hold of Two Oddballs Creative at 2oddballs.com, that's the number 2, oddballs.com, or by calling them at 417-986-6332.
and you touched on this a little bit, but when you are listening to or watching some sort of political content, whether it be maybe a debate or something like that, how do you listen to what candidates or people in the party are saying, and how do you separate the things that they may be saying to just evoke an emotion or an action to go vote for them, and what their actual policies and goals will be in office?
Right. Well, I wanted to be a White House correspondent, so I'm listening and reading and watching this stuff a lot. I just had I was driving in my car actually for a couple of hours today, and I listened to I listened to sports and news talk the whole way. I know that's boring for people who would have music blasting, but I'm listening to sports and news talk, and I'm always listening for the responses. The probing is the short answer. I'm listening for the answers when they go beyond the talking points. So if you watch political ads on television, those are endorsed and paid for by candidates. They're going to twist and turn and put their own spin on every little thing they want to talk about. And I just kind of laugh and shake my head at the political ads. Oh yeah, Biden's saying this. Oh yeah, Trump's saying this. And oh yeah, the third party candidate saying, okay, that's what you expect them to say. And when they debate, the debate moderator will ask questions, and they're going to respond. Their immediate response in the debate is their talking points, boom, 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 and boom, boom, boom. They probably expected the question, but then a good moderator will go, okay, you said this, but 6 months ago you said this, and you did this, but a year ago you put forward a policy that did this. And I'm always looking for the probing, and because they don't always see that coming, and I want to hear what they say when they go beyond the basic talking points. And I think that would be something that's important for the public to understand, that political ads are political ads. They're paid for by the candidates or interest groups that support them. So that's straightforward, standard stuff. And then listen to what they say when they get beyond the obvious talking points. The politicians, when there's a debate, they know what a lot of the questions are going to be. They have experts getting them ready for it, and they'll do practice debates and everything. They know what the moderator is probably going to ask. They know topics, and they'll have a lot of talking points at their fingertips. But as it goes on, the second half hour or some probing questions, that's where you get some information that can help you as a voter, I think, to really decide, especially if you're on the fence.
For the public that may not fully understand this, can you explain a little bit about how they're able to maybe do the mudslinging and get away with it if it's not 100% true?
Right. When we talk about libel law, you always hear people saying they're going to sue somebody, that politicians or people that are in the public eye. Oh, I'll sue them for saying that. And they either don't do it or it doesn't go anywhere, because politicians have put themselves in the public eye. They have opened themselves up for public scrutiny, for debate. And when they're making comments against each other and saying what a horrible person the other candidate is, that's just considered politics. It's really hard to sue for anything like that, libel or slander. Public figures have a hard time doing that because they put themselves out there. So if somebody says, something about a general regular citizen, they can sue for libel or slander, which is the broadcast version of libel, which is written. But politicians and celebrities have a hard time doing that because they've put themselves out for public scrutiny. And most of what people say can be defined as opinion. I think this guy's a bum. I think this woman's a liar. That can be labeled as opinion, and you can't sue for opinion. People are entitled to their opinion in America. Libel is very, very difficult in that it has to be something that's printed or broadcast that has to be untrue, and whoever put it out there has to have known that it was untrue and went with it anyway. And that's, it's either something that's, where it's considered reckless disregard for the truth, where they didn't even try to find the truth, or it has to be some kind of vicious attack. You knew it was wrong and went with the story anyway because you're out to get somebody. So it's very difficult. So when it comes down to politics and political season and they're slinging mud at each other, a lot of it can be defined as opinion, and even if they're stating something as fact, it's candidates attacking each other, but they put themselves out in the public eye, and one politician will have the opportunity to correct the other. They said that I put this bill forward. That's not true. I did not. So the very fact that they have the opportunity to correct the other politician makes it difficult to stop them or sue for. So you'll see a lot of mudslinging, and it's gone on for centuries. It's gone on for a couple of hundred years in America.
What, in your mind, would a good media literacy class look like?
Well, I think that a full media literacy class needs to start with what we've talked about here. So keep in mind that I talk about these things as a section on media literacy in my intro to mass communications course. And I repeat it in a lot of other courses. If I teach theory or ethics, and I go over it in some of my video production courses, I remind the students, do you know what you're watching and reading? And we talk about these basic types of media, of news media, sports media, Hollywood. A lot of young people especially can't even separate, Hollywood from, they'll rant and rave about the media. And then, it's always with questions that I ask, what are you talking about? Where did you hear this? And it's some kind of movie or something that they saw, or it's some, a lot of times if it's political, it's one of the talk shows that they were listening to, and it's okay, well, you're hearing an opinion from a former politician who's now a consultant, isn't even a journalist at all, and so basic media literacy should be all about these things. Do you know what you're watching and reading? Local news, national news, cable news, what is a media market? Do you know the difference between professional news and paparazzi? And then when I say opinion and news, that goes for sports too. A lot of people, you have to. I use sports as an analogy a lot because I say, if you heard somebody on one of the sports shows, one of the commentators saying, "Well, I think this team is not very good, and I think that team is better," and then if they had breaking news, this coach just announced his retirement. Effective immediately. And so I say, would you simply not believe that breaking news because you've heard that person give an opinion about that coach and say they think they're not very good? And they say, oh, no, I would think it's right. And I would go and look at some other sports reporters that I like. And I say, great. That's exactly what you should do. And why wouldn't you do that for news? If you hear something in news and you think they might be saying something because they're opinionated, why wouldn't you go check on? I have, my social media feeds, especially, X, formerly Twitter, was full of reporters that I trusted. And they don't really give you news. They'll just tell you what they're working on, and it kind of tips you off. So I say, why wouldn't you go look it up? Why wouldn't you go look up the information that you heard and verify it and see if it's true with news? Because you'll do it with sports. And that's another aspect of a media literacy course, and knowing where to look and where to find information. Is this reporter a real reporter that somebody's claiming? You see a lot on social media with the fake news, and there is fake news out there. People will make it up and do it for clicks. Mm-hmm. But if you look into it, you'll find the reporter doesn't exist, the station doesn't exist, and teaching students how to look for that and find something that's fake. And it can go all the way up through knowing how to use your devices, knowing how to make an app. Media literacy can go all the way up into the technical aspect of knowing how to use applications and devices and things like that. But it needs to start with, what are you looking at? What are you reading? What are you talking about?
And This was a question I forgot to ask earlier, but I think it's a good time for it as well. What you just said, how can we find neutral, fair reporting on politics? Like, what traits should we look for in either a reporter or a site itself?
Well, you're looking for them to give straight facts, and I think that local news. I always focus on local news. And then to me, the other things are kind of how I sprinkle them in there. So in terms of a reporter, just giving straight facts, and you'll see this with local news, and they're going to give you information about this candidate, especially I'm not talking about presidential politics. I'm talking about state, local politics. They put forth this bill, and if it goes through, if it's approved, it's going to mean this, and it's going to mean that. Rather than giving their opinions about that bill, they'll ask somebody else. So what will this mean? What's going to happen? So they'll get witnesses that talk about it. So they're not giving you their own opinion. They'll get differing opinions from different people that might be able to help explain it. So you see a lot of that in local news, even about your local politicians. And they'll give examples of what a new tax law, what it might mean to a local family or something like that. They're not going to tell you what it means. They're going to they'll do interviews and get sound bites from people who might know and let them tell you. But they'll get both sides, not just one. And then I will sprinkle in national news to see what's going on around the country, and then cable news when I'm looking for opinions and commentary. So I would suggest people base their news in local news, which is kind of struggling on certain levels, but I think that there needs to be a focus there. I had a debate with a professor one time who was talking about the debate was about, he was talking about, I believe it was agenda setting, which is the theory, the media theory that the news media is not telling people what to think, but what to think about. And they focused on the automobile industry and how they didn't go into enough detail about unemployment and how it's affected people's lives and their jobs. And I looked into this research they did, and all they looked at was national news. That's all they looked at. And I said, well, if you looked into some local news from Flint, Michigan, I'm sure there were countless stories about people losing their jobs and families having to move away, and the local economy crashing because the auto industry left. And if you did, it's the same research about steel mills. If you looked into Cleveland, Ohio, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Buffalo, New York, about how it affected people and lives. You could take a national look at the unemployment, how it affected the unemployment rate, but it doesn't tell any stories. But if you look locally, you would see all of that. And so that's why I think local news is the way to go. And then you can add some national and cable in there. But if you're just listening to a single cable outlet, all you're going to hear is opinion about, from one perspective. And so I would avoid that.
And it's not always the easy thing to say is, they're trying to sway our opinion or whatever, but I think people don't understand that these local news serves a far different audience than, those cable shows. They have to serve their audience, and somebody in Florida doesn't necessarily care about the local impact in Flint, Michigan of an automobile plant shutting down.
Right.
So it's not that they're always doing it nefarious things, but I think it is, like we've said, it's very important to understand where that information is coming from. And I think that's part of what causes some of this divide is, like we were saying earlier, somebody coming to you with, a piece from cable news or, unfortunately, a lot of times a meme that they saw on Facebook with
right. Yeah.
with a take on an issue. And I really think that this could help solve a lot of public discourse surrounding politics is if they just understand where the information is coming from, understand where the opposing viewpoint is coming from. It would maybe not solve, I almost said the wrong word there, maybe not solve the argument, but it help make it a more constructive discussion.
Right, yeah, and look for differing opinions. When you see a meme or something on social media, I see them all the time, and I just usually laugh because I think, well, this tells about 1 or 2% of what's really going on with this situation, and there's a whole lot more to this. And it's true that this meme about something that happened, yeah, that's true, it happened, but this also happened, and it happened because of this or that. And there's a lot more to the story, and I would say, go beyond it. So that, if you look at look at the sources and where it's coming from, local news, it's all a for-profit business. Local, national, it's all for-profit. We've done that through deregulation over decades in the United States. So they have to try and survive by making money, but local news tries to make money by being the best at serving their community. So they make money through advertisements, but they make money through advertisements by having the trust of their local community, saying, oh, I'm going to watch this channel, I'm going to read this newspaper because they are the best at telling me what's going on. And that could be, like I said, road closings, product recalls. What do you need to know living in your community? And they want to be the best at that, at serving the community in every way. And if they're the best and more people watch, they make a little bit more money through advertising. You go all the way up to cable, the cable news talk shows that I talk about. They are trying to appeal to people who have already made up their minds. They're trying to appeal to liberals or conservatives, or one that leans slightly one way or another, who are looking to have their ideas reinforced. I mentioned that earlier. That's called cognitive consistency, just getting reassurance that what you think is true, and there are beliefs that you already have that are that you prefer, your behaviors and values. It supports them. So they're trying to key on people who already have those opinions, and they make money through advertising that way. So if you look at where they're coming from, they're already focused on people who think one way or another. Local news is, hey, this is what's going on, you should probably know, and it's largely non-political. And when it is political, yeah, the local school board decided this, or the mayor decided to shut down this bridge or something, and we're just telling you what's going on. You can decide for yourself or look into it. But it's important to understand these are very different perspectives we're talking about.
What else could we do to make more informed political decisions this year to help keep us sane during an election year?
Well, this year in particular, or
I guess just in general.
People get caught up on presidential politics, and there are so many more. I mean, if you look at your ballot, people all you hear about. I mean, I shouldn't say that. No, most of what you hear about is the 2 or 3 presidential candidates. Usually, it's just down to 2. But you go to vote, and you're voting on 28 different things. You have different candidates all the way down to judge and magistrate, and you might have House, Senate, whatever, and even some bills, yes or no. There are lots of things to vote on. So I would really open your mind and look into everything that's going on around you, locally, statewide, and nationally. I think that if you understand local and state politics, it'll help you decide who you think better supports that for a presidential vote. So this candidate, is going to support what's going to be better for my state, or my local town. So I would just, open it up and look at different things, and not the angry opinions about that you hear of people shouting about this person being a good person or a bad person, because the government has 3 branches: legislative, executive, and judicial, for a reason. And presidents really can't just wave a wand and do what they want. They've got to get it through Congress, and they have to have support. So it's all very important. So I would take a much wider approach to looking at it. So a lot of people, a lot of Americans, the way they decide who they're voting for is through anger about the presidential candidates. But there are many, many, many more candidates you should be looking at for different different political positions for different offices that are important to you. And then if you look at the things that are important to your community and to your state, then I think that, that'll help you decide who you want for president. It's interesting that we're so polarized, though. I mean, I did my master's thesis largely on the 1988 election, and the biggest complaint that Americans had in the 1988 presidential election, that was George H.W. Bush versus Michael Dukakis. The biggest complaint Americans had was they couldn't tell the difference between the two candidates. That was the number one complaint. I can't tell the difference. They say the same things, or they're almost the same. And the candidates took all kinds of action to separate themselves from each other. Now, we're so completely divided that people are literally asking, can you two agree on anything at all? Is there anything at all that you agree on? So we've come that far since 1988. In 35, 36 years, we've gone from, I can't tell the difference, to, this is the worst person and this is the best person. It's come a long way. We're very polarized. And I think, a lot of the opinion shows that you hear have led to that, because people have just kind of drawn to one or the other, and it polarizes us. And I joke with my friends that I'm a true independent, meaning nobody likes me. My liberal friends think I'm conservative. My conservative friends think I'm a crazy liberal. It's like, I'm pretty much right down the middle. I'll decide issue by issue. And, that happens from, like I said, working in news, and I did my master's degree in social and public policy. So people will get all fired up and have opinions about an issue, and my response will be, well, wait a minute, let's look at some numbers on this and see, what a similar issue like this did in a different state. And my friends will just roll their eyes, like that's too much work. That's the way that's the way I make my opinions about issues. Well, if we do that, it's probably not going to work. They tried it in 3 other places, it never worked, and I'll analyze. So, it's just very different being a real independent.
Yeah, I've started to say that myself, that I'm an independent. I'm not exactly sure that that's where I lie, but I've started to say that, if only to force myself to do the same thing, because it's hard to find, maybe not hard to find truth, but it's hard to make a decision now with everybody screaming that you're wrong. So it's like, just to cover my bases, I feel like I circle around, and I have my ex set up the same way. It's reporters that I've read over and over that I trust will either bring me a viewpoint that's different from mine, or teach me something about a topic I really don't trust that I know much about. I think that that's the only way I've ever learned anything, is to find the experts in that industry and start comparing what they're saying, because especially in small town Missouri, where I'm living at right now, it's so funny to hear people come in and talk about, the politicians. This is really where this episode was born out of, was a conversation I had at a supermarket. Someone just came up and we were talking about, the old days, and just out of left field, they just bring up the presidential race, and, did you hear, what Biden did? And I just can't wait to vote him out of office, this year. And I'm like, where did you hear that?
Yeah.
And they're like, I heard it from so-and-so. And I'm like, well, where did he hear that from? Did you verify it? And the answer is always no. And they start getting mad right away when you're questioning it. And it's like, well, where that's the biggest takeaway I hope people get out of this episode, is to really vet your sources. It's like we were taught growing up to, if we wrote something in one of our papers, whether it was MLA or the APA, we had to cite our sources, and there's a reason for that. Like, we can't just pull things out of thin air and take them as fact and move forward with it.
Right, yeah. I agree. And when I do ask people, where did you hear that? Where did you see that? It often comes down to one of two things. Either one of the cable news talk shows that I've mentioned, or what we call an opinion leader, just somebody that they trust that told them, oh, well, so-and-so said this, and I tried, well, you mean your friend, or your uncle or your buddy at the bowling alley. I mean, maybe they don't have their facts straight. You should look into this. And I had mentioned before that I keep social media. I avoid politics and political discussions. I don't want to contradict myself. So when I say that I follow reporters on X, and that's usually where I do follow them, I don't comment on it. I just follow what they're doing. So they will post the stories that they're working on and where they're heading, and I will follow it and see. It kind of gives me a heads up as to what's coming on the news. And I've heard about. I had former students and reporters that I know that were on their way to mass shootings in Newtown and various Uvalde, different places across the country, Colorado, and they're always very, very somber, headed to what they're saying is a mass shooting. Watch for more to come, and not giving you any opinions. They're just telling you, here's what I'm working on, here's where I'm heading. And of course, I got private messages from former students that were headed to that have headed to big events, big tragedies, events, whatever going on like this. But I think that always ask where somebody got their information, and it's really interesting to find out because a lot of it's kind of shaky. So, and in terms of getting a balanced opinion, I will do it knowing that I might be getting a biased opinion. So, like we mentioned earlier, if I'm looking for opinion on some political stance or something, I'll watch all three of the major cable news talk shows. I will sit and flip around. Okay, this is the liberal perspective. This is the conservative perspective. And I always hear things on both sides that I hadn't thought of. And then you form your own opinion as opposed to letting someone just tell you what to think. So that would be my advice in terms of forming your own opinion. Listen, look for straightforward information from local news on out, and obviously the politicians are going to tell you what they want you to hear. And then if you want some different opinions about whatever topic it is, guns, abortion, taxes, the environment, anything, try to find differing viewpoints and then form your own.
Well, I appreciate it, Kevin. I know that I was very lucky to have you as a professor, so I hope everybody else is able to get something out of this as well, and hopefully be able to have a more productive discussion with their family come this this election.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I only wish everyone was like you. You were a good student and curious and always wanted to learn more. I remember you asking me, I would tell things to the class, and you asking me in class, where did you hear that? And I love that question because I can always answer it unless I'm telling a joke. But that's I wish everyone was curious like that, and I guess that's why here you are doing this show. So it's a really good thing to be curious and ask questions, and thanks for inviting me. This was great. It was great to talk.